Hello, everyone. Welcome to South by Southwest Online 2021. This is Business Finland's panel session on product security, consumer privacy, and citizen trust. This is a part of Business Finland's presence at the South by Southwest Online 2021. This is the first of what we called tech panels. We have two others coming up tomorrow and on Friday. What is Business Finland, you might ask? Business Finland is the Finnish government's innovation funding arm. In Finland, it means we're funding startups in different technology areas. Here in the US, what we're doing is we're talking to US businesses on doing business with Finnish tech companies, and even in Finland, there are plenty of incentives and opportunities for you to discover in Finland. My name is Petra Söderling. I'm stationed here in the US to help the US companies with these opportunities. So Finland and cybersecurity actually go way back. When I was studying, a lot of my student friends started working for a company that's now called F-Secure, one of the most well-known Finnish cybersecurity companies. We have lots of other companies today. We have 4 brilliant speakers on this topic that I will introduce shortly. Before we get there, a couple of house rules. All of you attendees are muted by default, and I cannot unmute you, and you cannot unmute yourself. But you can ask questions via the Q&A chat. You have an opportunity to send your question either to everyone or just to the organizers. And by the end of the panel discussion, I will be taking questions and directing them to our panelists. The session is recorded, so all of you who have registered to this GoToWebinar session will be receiving a link. We have actually two types of attendees here today. We have those people who are coming from the South by Southwest platform. So thank you for making the time. I know there's a lot of competition, very good programs on the South by platform. And then we have people who have registered directly, discovered us somewhere else in the internet. So welcome to all of you as well. All right, without further ado, let's start introducing our panel. Our first speaker today, or panelist rather, is Dr. Catharina Candolin. If I may ask, Catharina, you turn on your video so we can see you. Hello. Dr. Catharina Candolin is a cyber expert at the OP Financial Group in Finland. Before joining OP, you worked 14 years in the defense sector, including the Finnish Defense Forces and the NATO headquarters. That's quite impressive. Tell us a little bit what you're doing today.
Yeah, first of all, hello everyone. And what I'm working on especially today is our cybersecurity strategy and issues related to the strategy. I also focus on developing our cyber exercises and also situational awareness and open source intelligence regarding cyber issues especially. And I also work with enhancing public-private partnership when it comes to cybersecurity issues. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
That's fantastic. That's very relevant to what we're talking about today. The next panelist is David Chartier. You are the CEO of Arctic Security. If I can ask also you to turn on your camera so we can see you. There you are. Hello. David's worked in cybersecurity since 1995. Hi. You are American, but you have started working in Nordea, a Finnish bank back there, and then you also have worked in Norway, in Oslo. Probably one of the most well-known things, at least for Finns, is the Heartbleed vulnerability that was discovered by your company, Codenomicon. That affected 1 billion devices at the time. It was some years back, but we all still remember that. So Arctic Security, that's your current company. Tell us a little bit what you're doing there.
Yes, thank you. So first, one thing on Heartbleed, that was almost 7 years ago this week. We started to do the research, testing some of our own software for vulnerabilities, and that led to the discovery of Heartbleed. And I just did a check. There are 73,000 servers around the world that still run Heartbleed today. So easy problem to fix was a massive problem 7 years ago. And today, very many companies still have servers with OpenSSL with Heartbleed vulnerability on it. So it's, I think we can talk about this vulnerability management and bill of materials. But what do I do today? I run a company called Arctic Security from the great city of Oulu, Finland. And what we do is we have an early warning system for companies. We take in data from 150 plus different sources of compromised machines and open and vulnerable services, and we match that to companies so that they can fix the problems they have. And on a daily basis, we see about 10 million incidents of compromised machines and vulnerable services happening at companies that they basically don't know about. So it's a massive problem in the world, and we're trying to help companies fix their own problems before they become catastrophic.
Wow, that's at the same time very impressive and very worrying. Thanks for that, David. Okay, we actually stay in the city of Oulu. Our next panelist is Jasmin Hulkko. Can we see your face, Jasmin? You're coming up. There you are. Yeah, Oulu is actually really this, how do you say, concentration of innovation ideas and tech companies, tech startups. It's always nice to go there, and everyone's got new ideas. So Jasmin, you're the CTO at Signet app, and the idea with this app is to bring zero trust security model for government and business users through Signet Digital. Tell us a little bit how you're doing that.
Yeah, it's actually more like building these security models that are user-centric. So we are trying to enable people to, by providing the means to build their own needed security. So kind of giving them something that is currently missing from our current tool set of security tools, and building those purely from the perspective of the end user. So that's kind of the angle that we are trying to tackle the whole security concept.
Okay, and it's not just communications apps, it could be social media or any other.
Yeah, it's basically an encryption tool as of currently, but then we are like building it towards different business specific use cases. So it's then more of a solution, and that's the direction that we are going with the app. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, our fourth panelist today is Mr. Janne Uusilehto. Janne is the lead privacy PM at Google. Can we see your face? You're coming up there. There you are. Hello. And you are calling in. Where are you based at?
Sunnyvale, California.
Sunnyvale. Excellent. Yeah. That sounds so nice. Sunnyvale. It's a little bit different from Oulu. Yeah, Janne has a long experience in the ICT industry. You began working in this field already in the 1980s. And you as well have a background with the Finnish banking system, like so many of our panelists here. You started with the Merita Nordbanking, their security solutions, I guess I could say. You've also been a lead security person at Nokia in various positions. Excuse me. And I saw you when you were doing industry standards in the area of security. You've also worked with Microsoft Azure, and now you're at Google Cloud. Tell us, I'm sure everyone's curious what you're doing at Google Cloud today.
I'm mostly focusing on privacy, and especially in the Google Cloud privacy, and helping Google Cloud with privacy programs, but also with compliance programs like certifications and things like that. So.
Excellent. That's a really nice segue. So we have the topic of the panel is in three different fold, and the first one is product security. You know, when companies create products that are being used by people, be they business people or consumers, you have to take into account the privacy and the security and the robustness of the product or the service. but you also have other requirements. You have, you know, your bill of materials and other costs that go into it. You have the user experience requirements. You have other things, the size and things like that. So how do you manage privacy and security in a product in, you know, within all these requirements?
I can start a little bit, like, because I'm going more in the meta level. I don't do any products at the moment, or at least I'm not doing product development myself. So typically you should start on understanding the assets you're protecting and the risk you are managing, and that gives you a right direction. But the fundamentals are that who is actually doing the work. And like in my world, it has been a long time, like already in the Nokia times, I try to enable the capabilities in the corporates to be able to build, as typical corporate is having like security team, then there are security geeks, then there's a compliance team, there's a product team, but they are all separate teams. And it makes it really challenging if you are not getting these teams working like integrated together. And it usually starts from tools and automation, but more close you get these teams, better capabilities you are building of having a good product creation and like solid basis for the product creation. And then you start getting all these usability and technologies and you know, software development process, etc. But I leave that for the professionals in a panel to go deeper in that. But I just like it to put the, like, you know, basis that you have to have a certain structures in your company and your organization to enable the right things to happen. But then you have to actually start doing the right things as well.
I'm going to jump to Catharina because you mentioned strategy, that you work on the strategy. Do you want to continue from there?
Well, yeah, I agree in the sense that, yes, you have to have a process, and there's a lot of different components and people that you have to take into consideration. Of course, when you start with the requirements, they might come not only from the regulation and user experience, etc. But then also talking about secure development, that should be something that is taken into consideration from the very beginning, not something that you add on later on. And the whole concept of secure coding should be a way that you also, when you make the programming, that you take those things into consideration from the beginning. But you have to look at it as a process also, so that once you have your product, you usually test it in various ways. You test for usability, you test for functionality, and so on. So you should also test for security. So really do a stress test on the product to see how it's coping before releasing the product. But then keep on doing that, because of course there will be bugs that will be found later on. So you need to keep that testing and the feedback ongoing. And if possible, let also outsiders test your products, for example, through bug bounties or other programs, so that you're all the time kind of, you know, the state of play of where your solutions are. So it's not something that you start and you finish. It's a continuous process as long as that product is available.
Jasmin, you are creating a new product now. Are you doing all the things that Janne and Catharina mentioned that you should be doing?
Yeah, we are a very small team, so it's, for us, it's not like problem by how do we manage team communications and capabilities, but rather that we can build the product in a way that when we have these hardcore security requirements and then we have these specific functional needs, that these two are actually from the ground up, they meet properly in the whole, because the whole point of the app that we are building is actually to provide a classified level of security using ordinary mobile devices. So in that concept already, you have to take everything out that is not needed, because to be able to build something like that in a ordinary mobile device, you have to push the threat envelope so small already that there are like very limited amount of things left in the concept itself. So that, and then those only then those things can be actually secured in sufficient level. So for us, it was mostly trying to find the fit between the regulations and demands and then the functional needs. But yeah, those processes are
Yeah,
there.
describe a little bit in more detail. How does the consumer use your service? I think it's a little unclear for me at least. I know it's
Okay.
but is it something I download?
Yeah, if I give a very, very short wrap up, it's basically a tool where you gather your contacts by meeting them, like in the physical world once. So then the security keys are changed. And after that, you have a way to encrypt and decrypt between those people any information that whatever you want. And then we don't provide any infrastructure because you have all those means of communications already, like WhatsApp, email, whatever, Dropbox. So you basically send the encrypted things over those channels that you already have and your users are already using. So in that sense, we don't communicate to the internet. So all the protocol stuff is already out of the question and that kind of thing. But on the side of how to develop a secure product, it's actually especially those kind of processes so that single developer cannot push anything to the final product without somebody else making sure that those changes are okay, and a lot of that kind of specific procedural methods to keep the whole secure, because it's also not only the application itself but the whole chain of how do we produce this application.
Yeah, you were talking a little bit what Catharina was saying as well, that you need to take the security into account throughout the whole process. You mentioned, Catharina, testing and bug bounties and things like this. So I'm going to jump to David. How did you describe your service? An early warning system. How do you see the product?
Well, first I'd say on the product development side, typically most companies don't put enough effort in threat modeling, so they don't figure out how are the people going to break your product, how are they going to misuse your product, how are they going to use it in ways you never thought. So there's a lot of stuff that you can save yourself huge problems from if you do some threat modeling ahead of time. So you build a better architecture so you can't get compromised through some workaround. Maybe they don't even hack you, they just can find a way to get around the authentication or something. So this is something you can do. Most companies don't do it. Another thing most companies don't do is have a machine readable bill of materials for all the software used in the build of their products, because software components are becoming old, they get compromised, people spend a lot of time trying to break things, and when they break them, they might be able to compromise you. And then if you build software with tons of components and you don't know what they are and what versions they are, you have a very hard time protecting your product, because you have an old version of something you don't know about, and there's, you can go online and find exploits for that. So this is like what I've seen in the business: little threat modeling, not enough security testing, because there's multiple tools you need to use and you need to do it all the time. So I totally am on board with that. And then you need to know what's in your product. So what we try to help with is finding these things you didn't know about because you bought a product. Your vendor didn't give you a bill of material because it's not mandated by law. So you go to the food store, you can buy food and you know what's in your food. You buy software, who knows? And this is a fundamental problem. So we help alert people when there's stuff in their software that's remotely findable that's really bad for you. And then we help when things are actually compromised by telling you, hey, you have a compromise that you didn't know about. And this is typically almost always goes back to you have some old software you didn't know about, because most of the stuff that's out there is old. There's new versions. If you would have patched them, you wouldn't have had the problem. So this is, the story every day is people run old software, they get compromised for the most part, and then it's very small part of the market, which is 0-day and other things that are active out there. The mass is stuff that could be prevented with a little better IT hygiene.
there was a lot of things there. Before I let other people continue, I just want to remind our attendees, do post the questions already now. We are screening them all the time. So by the time the panel is finished, we'll be taking some of the questions from online. So do keep them coming. Does anyone want to speak to what David was saying? There were a lot of things to unpack.
Adding one thing, or let's say kind of closing a loop a little bit, I really like it, this threat modeling, because yeah, that's the key of you understanding which part of the system or product you need to focus on first. Also identifying the assets you are protecting. And that kind of really gives you the right focus area in addition. Also, the other thing I really like it was that, yes, understanding the business model of the attacker, like what they are after, helps you a lot in practice as well. We used to do studies on my previous places, like called the sinister business model, like, you know, what's the business model of breaking this particular system? What are the possible ways the hacking community or whoever is attacking you is gaining their goals through your system, and what are those goals? Then it's way easier to start thinking on how you are protecting yourself.
Yeah, I have to also say that the scope of threat modeling, because, you know, our app basically does three things: keys, encryption, and throwing files around to other apps. That's it. And even then, our threat model canvas is like huge. You have to print it like very large if you want to see it properly. And then if you take that same approach to any other like more complex products, backend services, and everything like that, it's a huge project actually to understand the whole threat model that you are like supposed to protect your product from. So it's not an easy task to achieve even. Yeah.
Catharina, do you want to add something to David's?
No, I think this has wrapped it up pretty good.
Okay, we're really short with time. We're trying to keep this in a half hour. We don't have a hard deadline, but I know a lot of people need to leave in about 8 minutes. Let's move on to the others. So we have a three-part topic: the product security, consumer privacy, and citizen trust. We talked about privacy a little bit as a consumer using the products. I want to go back to David, what you mentioned, the architecture of the whole thing, having new and old software there. And you also mentioned machine readable build components or build materials. So I want to link that to standardization, which is, I don't know if it's piecemealing all of these different things separately. Is that an issue for you guys, or are we seeing some kind of ISO standard that's going to fix everything? Janne is laughing. You can go first.
Yeah, it sounds so fun, like, you know, some standard is solving all the problems. But yeah, I you know, lately, like, not my earliest, I didn't like too much on standards, but nowadays I like standards a little bit more, of course, focusing on the compliance in my current work as well. It's actually a great tool on mainly maybe 2 or 3 reasons. That one is like, they are actually giving you a nice checklist what you're supposed to do, at least. Like we discussed earlier, that, you know, you have to know what you have to do and you have to have the right people. But not only it gives you a checklist, but it also provides your common language. Like, based on my experience, most of the companies are already doing the right stuff. They are doing like lots of things in engineering. There's a lot of details in place. But when they try to communicate that out, it comes out as a, like, you know, localized jargon, corporate own messages. But when there's a standard, it gives you a common framework you can evaluate your against, and then you are able to give out a kind of list of things you do, also verified by some trusted third party. So I don't see standards as much as like making you do the right thing, but it more enables you to communicate the things you already do and provide those in a common language for others to evaluate and understand, so then they can build the trust to you. And of course, then there is the other thing, like there's a lot of third parties who are willing to help you to do the evaluation. So there's like win-win-win for everybody, and that's the thing I like on these standards. And nowadays we have a great standards for privacy as well, like this ISO 27701, which is like, you know, having most of the commonly known controls and things built in already, which is then helping to harmonize as well. Like, you know, there are a lot of local, like, you know, CCPA, GDPR kind of things, which are great things as they are, but there are lots of other things as well. But typically they have a lot of common in already existing, like 27701. So then you can be prepared for the local standards as well when you are doing one holistic big standard. So it kind of gives you a stepping stone, and then you are more ready for taking the locals as well.
May I continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think standards as well as regulation, I think there needs to be a good middle way, because if we don't have any standards, then obviously things wouldn't work, and they wouldn't work together. It would be a wild west. But on the other hand, you can't have them too tight either, because technology still evolves fast. And if we make too tight standards, then that's always going to lag behind. So I think that there needs to be a good middle way. And again, looking at the use case per se. So let's say you have a very small company that doesn't, let's say, handle information that is, for example, on a top secret level, like on a government level. You don't need to take into account all the Tempest requirements and whatnot that many standards may still list. But then on the other hand, if you're like, let's say, a government agency or a military or a company who works with these entities, and you are handling really sensitive information, etc., and your threats are like more major ones, like you have nation states, then obviously you need to look at more criteria. So you always have to also look at how you can adapt the standards. That do you really have to adapt 100%, or is 75% enough in your case? So I think that it should not be something that is like carved into stone, but something that we should take most advantage of without hanging ourselves to them.
Yeah, if I've understood correctly, Jasmin, you're doing a consumer product, and David, you're doing a B2B product. Correct me if I was wrong, and maybe Jasmin, if you want to go first, and how do you make sure that your consumers trust your service?
Well, I would like to comment on the standards first. We are actually currently following the Finnish government's security regulations, which is somewhat comparable to the NATO restricted level communications. So basically, that's our kind of envelope where we work at. And for that, it was actually kind of hard to adapt those requirements in this specific use case, so to say. So we also did quite a lot of research on different kinds of security standards like OWASP and different frameworks that provide kind of a more practical and more detailed lists of how should you think about specific things. And by combining those, then we can like tell that, okay, we didn't kind of be able to fit our product in this specific requirement, but we instead we took some ideas and practices from these 3 other standards, and that's how like we adapted our specific case so that it can be like audited according to the standard that doesn't really have a correct kind of fit per se. And what was your question about how do we
how do you make sure the consumers trust your device? And I was also thinking that it relates to standards in a way that if you say that your product is compliant with ISO or maybe it's verified by a private third party.
It's actually currently being verified by the Finnish government itself. So that's one of the things. But basically, how we can provide trust for government entities and companies is that we can actually open source our product, because that's not in our threat model. It's not based on hiding things away. So basically, any company that wants to take it in their use, they can actually audit it themselves if they like to. And basically, the concept itself is really easy to understand to anyone. So I think that's kind of part of trust for ordinary people, because it's easy to understand what it does, and that's important as well, be understandable.
Thank you. David, you're thinking on standards.
I'm a big fan of standards, but I think the key thing is you have to also do lots of security testing, because just because somebody said or tried to follow the standard doesn't mean you have anything that's secure or private or anything. So everything is implemented by people, and you really need to do security testing. But I think it's a great way to harmonize and get people on the same page, and move the ball forward. But you really need to do testing, and you can't just get complacent that, oh, I followed this compliance checklist, I'm all good. So that's I think it doesn't replace real testing, and that's the only thing that you can you have to test. If you can't test, you can't verify it. So otherwise it's a waste of paper.
While nodding from the other panelists I'm seeing, we're unfortunately really running out of time. I want to bring up the last topic, which is trust, and Jasmin alluded that their product is being verified by the Finnish government. We're all aware of Estonia's digital citizenship, which is a way to bring the credibility of a country into solutions. How do you guys see that? Let me start with the financial sector. Catharina, is there a role for the countries and governments in this?
Well, of course, if you are looking already at how the sector is changing and becoming more heterogeneous, and you have much more suppliers, and you have open banking and whatnot, and you start to have this like more of a chain of a trust. So you need to have some, for example, if we are talking of the PSD2 requirements, you need to have someone who is, for example, verifying who the trustworthy partners are before you start to kind of operate with them, even if you provide open interfaces for them. So yes, there are of course roles for the government and governmental agencies to kind of ensure the trust in other entities, and especially the more open those societies becoming, the more we kind of need to have something to rely on. But of course, trust is a very difficult question. I mean, it's difficult to build, but it's very fast to lose.
We need to be wrapping up really soon. I have a question from the audience. What is the future? What will be the focus in the future when considering security solutions? I'm going to go to Janne, and then Janne, you can also talk about the role of the government, how you see that.
Yeah, actually, I was exactly thinking while you were saying this, like there's a really nice connection there. Of course, the predicting the future is super hard, so I'm not even trying. But I think there are certain elements we can a little bit evaluate there, like the trust is an interesting concept because it's based on who do you trust. And we already heard an example that one trusts technology, one trusts further like peer verification, like social media mostly is working. Others is trusting authorities like the governments. One is trusting nobody, like, I think the solution Jasmin is providing is exactly that. I trust nobody. I create my own integrity and I provide it to my closed networks. And all these are like vehicles for different kind of business models and communication. So it's more or less like based on who do you trust, and then you take model of that particular part of the business or communication. And you see already that there are a variety of these approaches. You use some electronic ID and trust model for dealing with the bank, some dealing with the government, some dealing with your friends. And like social media, it's only reputational trust that, all your friends and all your postings looks like you, so your friends know that it's you without looking to ID and having strong integrity in place. And I think that's the future, that you have like channel specific trust model and maybe the attribute based trust as well. But it will not be like one single solution for all, but it's multiple solutions depending on your application.
I would like to
quickly
add, if you're looking, if you're looking for what will be future, it's exactly how Janne said it. But I think you should look at the National Security Agency of the USA, which published like maybe last month their kind of a document, maybe 4 pages long document about zero trust models. How do you apply them in different kind of areas on infrastructure, product design, like cryptography systems, and etc. So that's kind of a good wrap up, at least to the directions where are we heading currently with these kind of security technologies. Yeah.
Catharina, how do you see the future product security, privacy, cybersecurity?
Well, I think that there's a lot of good things and work that has been done already to kind of ensure more trust in the future. I think that the GDPR that we probably, especially in Europe, are very well aware of, it already lays some groundwork for companies and other organizations to follow up on. So it means that you have to take these things into consideration, otherwise it will be fine, and that will affect everything. That will affect how you develop your product, that will affect what you, when you purchase products, what you demand from the software companies, that will put the strains on the processes in companies, that also put requirements on how to, for example, inform your customers if there has been a breach. Plus you also have a requirement to inform your national authority in privacy that, okay, there has been a breach. So I think that already by creating these requirements is going to push how things are done in the future to ensure privacy, whatever the technology is.
Last word today is going to David. You are American, you lived in the Nordic countries. Talk about your view on trust and the future of cybersecurity.
Well, my view is I think government needs to take a bigger role in leading by example, because if we leave it to the market, we're not going to get much of a trust out there, because so many of the consumers aren't at all concerned about trust. So if we leave it to market forces, I don't think it'll be a wild west of very many problems. So I think the governments around the world need to go together and, you know, how can they promote models that promote companies to provide more security, more privacy. You can't have privacy without security. So I think governments need to work together to do this. Otherwise, there'll be a few enclaves of secure applications on the net for the paranoid, and everybody else will be suffering. So I think governments need to probably work together on that. That's my take.
That is the perfect ending. As someone who's working for the Finnish government and working in the US, I really encourage the Finnish, US, and other governments to work together on solving these problems. Thank you all the panelists. This was great. I wish we had more time. Thank you all the attendees. I'm so grateful that you took the time to join us today. Allow me a few days to process this video. The link will be sent to everyone. If you have any questions on any of this, you will find me somehow and I will answer your questions. With this, I will wish everyone a really good day and a really good evening where you are. Thank you.